Morning. For those of you who have never seen one of my presentations before, I'm Trudy Tobias of Truist Coaching, and I also have Truist Life Counseling. But Truist Coaching, both of them have a dragonfly as my logo. And the reason why is because dragonflies stand for transformation. So I work a lot with women in transition, and dragonflies look like they're fragile, but they're very strong. They've been around since prehistoric times. They can move like they're like helicopters. They move up and down and sideways, so they're adaptable. And that's what I hope to help my clients become, whether they're my coaching clients or counseling clients. And there is a difference between the two. I won't take the time to go into that right now, though, because I want to cover a lot on grief. All right. Feel free to put questions in the chat or to say them out loud, because I want this to be interactive. I'm going to present the first part kind of fast because that's understanding more information about grief, so that we could spend hopefully a little bit more time on why you attended, which is how to transform that grief into strength and hope. All right. So I am a licensed clinical social worker as well as a reinvention coach. And there's my dragonflies again. So what is grief? I'm sure you all are fairly familiar with it, but I'm going to have us all start with a definition that we can all understand. And I think that it's interesting that the root word is gravis, which translates to a heavy burden. So for those of you who are currently in grief, or anytime you've experienced grief, I'm sure it felt like that. It's really our own natural emotional experience that's triggered by a loss. And it's usually a loss in the context of death, but it does not have to be. I know at least two of you right now are experiencing losses of your spouses, and my condolences for that. But it doesn't have to be just the loss of a loved one, although that's what it usually is. So it could be due to a job. Does anybody else want to, before I show you a list, anybody want to chime in what you think it could be? All right, well, a relationship. So it could be divorce. It could also be like a friendship, or, you know, any kind of relationship that is lost. Health is a loss. The health of for a loved one or your own health, you know, and adjusting to that. Faith, a lot of times loss, you know, because crises that have occurred, people can have a loss of faith. And then there's what I call disenfranchised grief, which is actually often harder because we as a society often don't recognize it. You know, when you lose a loved one, you know, you have a funeral, you have formal ways of acknowledging it, depending on your religion, how you do that. And people often gather around, they bring you food, they try to help out. But there's other kinds of grief. Now, this is a kind of a grief that I've actually experienced, infertility. So the non-baby having trouble becoming pregnant, or having a pregnancy loss, which again is something I've experienced. So that's that. And there's no rituals around that. Adoption, I am a mother through adoption, and there's a lot of loss for everybody involved, the birth parents, the adoptive parents, as well as the adoptee. So I'm just presenting things, you know, just for you to start thinking about. Kids leaving home. When I worked at Moses Cone Employee Assistance Counseling Program, I once had a woman come, her colleagues brought her in on an emergency basis. She was falling apart, literally at work, and it was because she was an empty nester. Different people grieve differently. You know, that's something you expect, and you wouldn't think that would cause somebody to fall apart, but it did for this particular person. What about dreams? And that happens, you know, for those of you who just lost your husbands, it's also a dream that you're going to get older together, right? Or in the case of like pregnancy loss, it's a loss of a dream, or of a divorce, it's a dream of the marriage. You know, it's a dream of what you were expecting to have happen. Moving can also be grief, whether it's somebody moving away from you or you moving away from others. I'm from Chicago, in case you can't tell by the way I talk. And there's definitely loss involved with that because my sister and her family are still up there. And then lifestyle, what does that mean? Well, maybe with the loss of a job, you lost some a way to have more money come in. Maybe you have to change your lifestyle. Maybe you have to downsize. All of that is also a loss on top of other losses. And as I said, we don't have rituals to really help people through that. You can grieve over all of these things and more that I haven't even mentioned. And pets, I have a dog and a cat, and that is a huge loss for those of us who are pet lovers. Those can be really difficult. But here's the thing, grief can be completely healthy. You might feel like you're going nuts or whatever, but all of us experience grief at some point in our lifetime, and there's just a natural progression of what occurs. It's not really a progression though, it's kind of and we'll talk about that, a mishmash of what occurs, but it's natural, even if it feels like you feel like you're just going crazy. So this is what I mean by a mishmash. If you've ever heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, they talk about the 5 stages of grief. And we're going to talk more about that. And it's looked at like kind of a linear event, but actually, as you look on the thing on the right, you see it's all tangled up. It's not a linear event. We go from one stage to another, back again, back and forth. And there's a feeling from a lot of people that, okay, 6 months to a year, you should be through this. Well, you know what? Different people grieve in different ways. So grief has no deadlines. The idea, though, is to learn to live with the grief rather than get over it. It is a misnomer to think, oh, you're just going to have to get over it. No, you learn to live with it and incorporate it into your being. That's how you grieve in a healthy manner. So I just like to ask some folks, what have you experienced that people have said to you in their effort to help you feel better? And I would say it's not what people says, it's what ignorant people say. Anybody want to share? Quiet group. What about, oh, he's in a better place, especially if he were sick ahead of time? He's not suffering anymore. I don't know about you, that doesn't really help you, you know. But people don't know what to say. You know, when I was going through infertility and then I lost a 6-day-old infant, they would say really stupid things like, oh, well, you could try again. Like, really? That replaces a baby? You know, it's just, you know, you're young, you can do it again. I mean, and it's not they're trying to be evil, they just don't know what to say. They're ignorant. So what I want you to know is that you may experience a lot of ignorant people, and as much as possible, just put up your, what I call your psychic shield, and just let it bounce off of you, because they don't mean to hurt you, even though it may feel hurtful. Does that make sense? So you just have to kind of go, okay, they don't know any better, because perhaps they haven't been through it themselves. And different people will say different things based on their faith, which may not be your faith. You know, like, well, at least he's in heaven now. If that's not something you believe, then that's difficult to hear. So 6 areas that grief affects. So I'm sure that all of you have experienced some of this, but it affects us physically. Right? And certainly it affects us cognitively, mentally. We don't think as clearly. Emotional. It can also interpersonal or social, affects us that way. It can affect us spiritually. And as I mentioned earlier, it can affect our lifestyle, what we're used to. So grief affects all of this. So we're dealing with multitude things all at the same time. One of the things I want to point out about the physical symptoms of grief is that it resembles symptoms of depression. So these are the same, whether it's grief or depression: loss of appetite, difficult sleeping, fatigue and loss of energy. Any of these seem familiar to you? Okay. Physical pains. Sometimes we can get physical pains due to that. And this is important, a suppressed immune system. So you really want to be aware of that, especially in this day of COVID. physical agitation where you just can't sit still and you're jittering around, and heartbreak. Studies have shown that, especially with widowers, and I say especially with widowers, with men, that there's a really high incident of heart attacks 6 months after becoming a widower. So it actually can affect the arteries and coronary. You can literally have due to heartbreak. These are the same thing, whether it's depression or grief. And sometimes when you're grieving, you may wonder, am I doing this? You know, am I really in trouble here, or where am I with this? Here is a picture of what? Is this person in depression or is this person grieving? What do you think?
Could be either.
Yeah, when I was it could be either. That's the whole point. When I was looking for pictures for this presentation, this picture actually appears when I look up depression, and it also appears when I look up grief. It could be the same thing. But here is the biggest difference. So if you're wondering, am I just grieving, and is this a healthy grief, or am I really in, you know, becoming depressed? And it's not, it's normal to feel depression initially. But what you really want to look at, the physical symptoms, as I just showed you, are very much the same. But here is what happens emotionally with grief. And here's what happens with depression. It's really mainly what you want to, like a feeling of worthlessness and prolonged difficulties in functioning. You're going to have difficulties in functioning at first with grief, but if it's prolonged, you may really want to get some professional help, because it could be depression, and especially if there's any suicidal ideation, which means that you're thinking about not being here anymore. So I have to say, when my baby died, I wasn't just in grief, I was in depression. I sought professional help because I did have some of this suicidal ideation. It wasn't really how I didn't think about how I was going to kill myself. I just thought about it would be really nice not to be around anymore. So that was difficult. I needed help to get through it. So I just want to encourage you guys to look at the difference and see where you are in this. As I said, I know I'm going through this quickly, and these are heavy issues that I'm presenting. That's why I was just talking to Kate about perhaps having more of a workshop than just a presentation. Okay. But here are the emotional symptoms of grief. We talked about depression, so there is going to be some depression and despair and hopelessness involved. There's also a feeling of isolation, like, wow, I'm all by myself. Nobody else is experiencing this. You may feel also a sense of guilt, especially if there's unfinished business, you know, that you wish you had done something different, or you wish you could have said one more thing, or had spent more time with the person, whatever it is, there can be. And the other ones that I want to go into a little bit more are anger and hostility and anxiety. Because we often get scared of anger. So let's just look at this a little bit more. I want you to know that anger is a secondary emotion. If you're feeling angry, it's because you're either hurt or frustrated. So frustrated means you have a goal and you can't attain it for some reason. It could be finishing up, you know, on a deadline on time and something's preventing you. And that could be frustrating. Or you're in traffic and you're late, and that could be frustrating. Or your feelings have been hurt. That's why we generally feel anger. It's a secondary emotion. It doesn't come first, although it feels like it does. But it's, in terms of grief, it's really just our brain protesting against something that we think is unfair, unjust, and frustrating. Like, it's unfair that our husbands died and we're still here, or it's unfair that I had trouble conceiving, or it's unfair that you know, that people I care about moved away, or my sister thought she was pretty angry that I moved away. So that's all part of it. But if you understand that it's a necessary expression for the deeper psychological stress of grief, it's a necessary expression to feel the anger and just let it flow through you instead of trying to fight it. because it provides a way of expressing against the powerlessness and despair that you're experiencing. So I want you to know that it's natural and okay to feel angry. But for those people around you, I have to tell you, they may feel that you are just being so hostile and bitter that they don't really enjoy being around you. So part of the difficulty is when you need people the most, you're kind of pushing them away. So just be aware of that and know that. And perhaps you can make amends to those people. Not saying to push down your anger, but just kind of letting them know that it has nothing to do with them. The other thing that happens is anxiety, and there's several different kinds of anxiety that really interfere. One is separation anxiety. So you're not only are you separate from your loved one, but you can also feel separation, like if you have to go out and do something by yourself. Maybe before you were certainly able to do it, but now it's really scary. Social anxiety, it can be scary. You want to be with people, but you don't want to be with people at the same time. And just a feeling of overwhelmed, like you got to take care of the bills and you have to, now you're the one who has to take care of the car repairs or whatever it is. You could just have a sense of feeling extremely overwhelmed by everything you have to deal with. I am sure those of you who are in the process of grief right now, I'm not telling you anything new. I'm just trying to get it into a context. Okay, any comments? Because I know I'm going through this fast. Anybody want to say anything? Okay. So here's the other things to be aware of, that grief can actually create a cognitive decline. You might find yourself having a lack of focus, a sense of dissociation and distance from reality because you feel disbelief, like this really can't be. Confusion goes along with it. Poor memory, that goes into the greater cognitive decline. And it also affects your thoughts and perceptions of your world. So I just came back from Chicago visiting my sister and her husband. Her husband has Parkinson's. He's had it for the last 10 years and he physically is declining. What is scary is my sister is cognitively declining at the same time. Now, there could be lots of reasons for it, but I also think it's because she is grieving not having a spouse who is healthy, and she has to do a lot of stuff for him now. And I've noticed how it's really affecting her with her memory and lack of focus and confusion. And it's hard to distinguish, is there something else going on? Because unfortunately our mother had dementia, or is this just because of what she's experiencing and it's a form of PTSD? So it's a little hard sometimes to delineate and know how to help. Sometimes you can really resent previously healthy relationships, like maybe your best friends still have their spouse and it's really hard not to feel some jealousy towards it, or that they weren't around for you more. And like I said, it can be feelings of distance and social withdrawal. You can be in a crowd and still feel all by yourself. The other thing to watch out for when I say lifestyle symptoms that happens often is that we forget to perform self-care. Like maybe we didn't brush our teeth for days in a row or take a shower, or, our daily routines. Maybe we're forgetting to take our medications or whatever. And the other thing that I think is sad, but it often happens, that we don't do activities that we previously enjoyed. Like maybe you used to like to bowl or to do needlework or something, and you've given that up. So some of the things that really could help us, sometimes we give up because we don't have the energy to do it. So hopefully one of the things is to get back to doing it. One of the things I'm encouraging my sister, who used to be an avid reader and she's not reading, I'm trying to encourage her to read again. And this one, and I know I experienced this with the loss of my son, but spiritual symptoms of grief. So sometimes we're angry at God, or a higher power, if that's what you believe in. And sometimes it really makes us doubt that there is a God or a higher power. There's a good book by Rabbi Cushman that was like, when bad things happen to good people. And he experienced that as a rabbi with his son, who had an illness and then eventually died. And here he was, a man of the cloth. And that's that's difficult. Perhaps you're no longer attending your house of worship. And of course, with COVID, that makes it even more difficult right now, because maybe your house of worship isn't even open right now, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or Muslim or whatever it is. We often get comfort being with people who understand us and in our faith and can help us grieve according to our faith. And if we're no longer there, it can also create more grief. And you might even stop your spiritual or religious practices. I had a sister my sister is 6 years older than I am, and there was a sister between us. My mother also lost an infant for totally different reasons at 3 months of age. I wasn't born yet, but being of the Jewish faith, my mother stopped keeping kosher as a result of losing her child. I know for myself, I have a lot of spiritual connections, and it took me about a year before I picked up any of them after my son died. I was just, so I needed it the most, and it's kind of literally throwing the water out with the baby out with the bathwater. That's what I did. So if you can hold on to some of these things that have helped you in the past, I would encourage you to do that. So going back to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I want you to know, you probably have heard of this before. These are the stages that they say people go through. Actually, she created the stages for people who were diagnosed with a terminal illness, not for those of us who are mourning the people who had the terminal illness. But a lot of this has, been misinterpreted that this is what it's for, but we do experience a lot of these reactions. Like first it can't be true, then we're angry, then all right, then we might bargain, which means, God, if you would just help them be better, I promise I'll go to church regularly, or whatever it is that you say. Depression, until you finally is an acceptance that, yep, this, you go from denial into acceptance. But as an earlier slide showed you, it's actually more like this. There isn't it's not a seamless progression. We go back and forth to different ones of these, depending on what's going on, until we finally can get to the acceptance stage. That doesn't mean that you're happy. It means that you've accepted that, yes, this is true. I have to live my life with this loss, whatever it is. But what acceptance means is you've incorporated it. And it can take a while to get to that point. So what can you do to overcome grief? There's different models for this. So one is you have to actively let go of what was lost, which is hard. But according to this model, there's a series of tasks and they happen in sequence. So the tasks are, one, to accept that the loss occurred. So you have to move past denial. So perhaps you're still at the stage where you think you see your loved one walking down the street or coming into a room, or you think you hear his or her voice. In the case of an animal, you might feel like you can hear their paw prints, their paws on the floor, that type of thing. What is necessary to do is to learn how to allow the pain without attempting to suppress it or redirect this pain elsewhere. If you don't, it will manifest somewhere in your body. So how do you allow the pain? You just allow it. You just allow, knowing you will get through it. There's an expression that what goes up must come down. I always say what goes down must come up. So just know that. And accept that life, no longer features whatever was lost, whether it's a divorce, whether you're the one who wanted out of the relationship or not, it is still a loss. And there's an adaptation that needs to take place. How do you adapt to that? And only when you have done this, only when you have accepted that the loss has occurred, that you allow the pain, you start to adapt to a new life, only then is the energy that you've been using. It takes a lot of energy to suppress pain. It takes a lot of energy. Only then can that energy be freed up so that you can adapt to changes that have happened. that make sense? Anybody have? Okay. Okay. So there's also the dual process model, which is called the grief cycle. And what happens is a loss orientation and there's a restoration process. The loss orientation, again, it's acknowledging the loss, and you have the experiences associated with pain. With restoration, you step away from the emotion, get a little break from it, and then you deal with the practical issues that accompanied the loss. And what happens is you go back and forth between these two orientations until there's a merging and you move on. That's what happens with it. You go from loss, restoration, back to loss, restoration, until you can incorporate it into your life. Another way to look at it, and you probably have heard of that grief comes in waves, like it can just swap over you. You think you've gotten through it, and then all of a sudden something else happens. Well, we start off with high morale and energy. And then when we first find out about the loss, or maybe it's an illness or whatever it is, we do go into denial, shock, or manic energy where we're just like all over the place. The downside of the wave, we start to feel low morale and energy, despair and depression. And then as we come up from that into that restoration stage, we have the restoration of energy and morale. Loss is accepted and life resumes, but it is a wave, and we can go through this over and over again. So this quote's a really good quote, I think. Pain will never leave us, but instead of putting energy into destroying the pain, put energy into creating pleasure, because life does go on. And it's not only okay that it goes on, it's necessary. And you could ask yourself, in the case of the death of a loved one, would they want you to be suffering? So here are some things for physical healing. This is very common sense, but, exercise correctly, you have good nutrition, get plenty of rest, hydrate. If you go to if you're at a funeral or a life celebration, just to offer the person who is grieving a glass of water. Believe it or not, we often forget to drink water, and we need to drink water when we're in grieving. Dehydration is a real problem. My brother-in-law that I mentioned, he has Parkinson's. I went up there for his 80th birthday, and a week later he ended up in the hospital because he became too weak to even get up on his walker. It turned out he was dehydrated. That was what happened. I would also suggest hiring an expert. I am not an expert in any of these things. I just know that that's what we're supposed to do, but that's not my area of expertise. So if you're having trouble with any of this, like perhaps hire a nutritionist or go to an exercise, like if you feel safe in doing it, or watch videos on how to exercise and that type of thing. Rest is really important and often gets disturbed during grief, as you know. So here's one thing that can really help with emotional healing, and that's writing a letter. So who do you write the letter to? Well, it could be to yourself, actually, or it could be to someone else, whether they're living or deceased. And then what do you want to express? Well, you want to express forgiveness. Perhaps you need to forgive yourself for something, which is complicated grief, if you feel like you haven't handled something well. Or it could be forgiveness because you're angry at the other person for leaving, even though they died. Maybe it's letting them know that, you forgive them for that, because it still can feel like a desertion. Express gratitude, that you're happy that for whatever experience that happened, that you're happy that it occurred, that you have, not happy, that's the wrong word, that you are grateful that it occurred, that you can be thankful for it because it added to your life. There's I think several of you are probably around my age, but there's a song by Simon and Garfunkel about I am a rock, I am an island, and if I never loved, I never would have cried. Well, you know what? That's a horrible way to go through life. So even though there's a lot of pain, you can be grateful that you had the person or objects or whatever it is in your life. It can be expressing love for yourself or for someone else. And it's okay to just write out how much you miss the person, or you miss the experiences, or you miss the relationship, whatever it is. And it's also okay to express, okay, I'm beginning anew. This is what I'm planning on doing. You can make it a promissory note to yourself to do this, or you can tell your loved one, I hope you understand, I'm moving on. That doesn't mean I don't miss you. It just means I need to do this for my life. And then what do you do with this letter? Well, depending on the situation, you can save it. You could actually create a nice little altar for it. You can burn it and think that it's going up to heaven. You can, you can just bury it someplace in your yard. You can do different things with the letter, or you may decide that you do want to mail it if the person is living. Releasing a balloon is also a way you could put, now there are balloons that are good for the environment, so you want to make sure you get the kind that dissolve. You can put messages in those balloons if you want, or you can just let it go with your love. I was out in California this past August, which is where my daughter and her kids live and her husband. And her dad died a year ago, August. And I was there on the anniversary date of his transition. And we went to the park and we released balloons. So we kind of imagined that the balloons were going up to heaven or whatever. That's what we did. And we released balloons. The other thing you might want to do is just light a candle to symbolize hope and light, because light always is stronger than darkness. You might want to use the candle to burn the letter, perhaps. Those kinds of things, lighting a candle. I know in the Jewish faith, on the anniversary of the death, we always light a candle in their remembrance. So that's something else you can do. For interpersonal healing, there are support groups. I will tell you that when I lost my son, I did see a therapist, but I also joined a support group that was specifically for not only for people who lost children, but people who lost infants or very young children. And I found that actually more helpful than the therapy. And I'm a therapist. The support group of being able to talk to people who understood the crazy thoughts I was thinking, like I couldn't go to other people's baby showers, for example. And I just, even good friends, I had to bow out. And people were saying, some people didn't understand that. I could talk about that in the support group and they fully got it, why I wasn't able to. Listening to others and their stories, chicken soup for the soul, there's some specifically for widows. There's a chicken soup for the soul for whatever loss you've had. And those are just inspiring, lovely stories. The other thing that really helps with interpersonal healing is helping others. If you have the energy, and I know initially in loss you don't, but when you get the energy to help others and focus on others, that really helps you get out of yourself. And so it's also a good way to start reconnecting with other people. We focus on what they're experiencing. So it seems like I have some new folks here. The people who have seen my presentations before have seen this before. But it is so important to understand this, that we have a life experience and we think that the life experience causes our feelings or our emotions. But there's actually something that happens in between that life experience and the feelings. Anybody know what it is? Anybody new know what it is? I would hope people who've seen this before, like Kate, remembers this. What comes between what really causes the feelings? It's not the life experience, by the way.
It's your attitude towards it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jenny. Yeah, absolutely. Your attitude. And what creates your attitude?
Your thoughts.
Yep, exactly. It's your thoughts I know that sounds really trite because anybody who's experienced, you know, becoming, which I know two of you are, at least a recent widow, you're like, well, anybody would feel this way. But it is our thoughts. Let's take a life experience that doesn't involve grief. Katie and I were talking about that we both don't like cold weather before you guys joined. That's one reason I left Chicago. I didn't like cold weather. When it snowed, let's say it snowed, it's gently falling snowflakes. It is the same life experience for everybody. Do you think there's some people who are happy about it and some people who are not? I was among
Yes.
I was not.
I was happy.
And you were happy. Okay. So what were you thinking of that made you happy with the snow, Jenny?
Oh, God sent these beautiful snowflakes down on this beautiful sunny day. And, you know, it was the first snow of the winter. And yeah.
Okay. And I was of the mind of, oh, shoot, I have to drive in this. Because at that point in my life, I was driving, you know, 27 miles to work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I would think, oh my God. And that, you know, and that was when cars weren't front wheel drive and all of that,
Yeah.
you know, it was scary to have a fishtailing car and all of that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So that's what I would be thinking about. And I'd be like this on the wheel. So our thoughts make up our beliefs. And what a belief is, it's just a thought that you have thought over and over and over again until you believe it's true. Whether it is or not, you believe it's true. And then we make up our own story. For those of you who may have heard, we had a whole presentation on the story we tell ourselves. I would just like you to know that this is everything here in the gold. This is in our control. The event is not. But these things are within our control to change if we want to feel better emotionally, and that will affect what we do, and it affects our body. And again, that's a whole other presentation or workshop. But I want you to just to kind of take that in, that we have the choice. Human beings are the only creatures that we know of on earth that have this choice. So what can you do when you notice that you've got intrusive, distressing thoughts or images or memories going on? Here's one technique. It's called the stop technique. The first thing is you say, stop those thoughts if they're spiraling and they're getting really out of control. Then take 3 deep breaths. By the way, it is impossible to be uptight and take 3 deep breaths at the same time. Breathing is the only system we have that is both within our control and outside of our control at the same time. I'm just looking at the time. All right. So take 3 deep breaths. That helps to center yourself and to relax. And then you just observe as if you were like a reporter. What are the feelings and images and thoughts? What are the triggers? Then you deliberately tell yourself, I'm going to pull back. Let me, whoop, hold on. Let me go back. I gotta get this out of the way so you can see the last part of this. How do I get, there we go. Okay, then you pull back. Is there another way of looking at this? And the last thing, which I don't know if you can read, but sorry about that. Let me move forward. The last thing here, the double P, is practice what works. I'm sorry you can't see it because this is in the way. Anyhow.
We can, Trudy. We can see it.
You guys can see it? Oh, thank you. Okay, good. All righty. All right, yeah, so practice what works. So actually take this chart out and fill it in and use it. You know, everything that I'm presenting doesn't do any good. It's like I think a lot of us are beyond the birth control stage, but it's like birth control. It only works when you use it, right? So, you know, these techniques are only going to work if you use them. So how do you change your thoughts? Well, if you're thinking I cannot live without my loved one or my friend or whatever, to I am able to rebuild my world. If you're thinking everything is horrible, you can change it to, I am grateful for all that I have in my life. My life has no meaning. You change it to, I live a purposeful life. Now, I'm going to explain affirmations in a bit. Those of you who've heard me before know this. But okay, here's some more. My world has fallen apart. To, I live with my loved one in my heart. Life is no longer worthy. To, life is a great gift. I cannot move on. To, I can embrace life again. You have to ask yourself, if you're thinking these thoughts here, how is that helping you live? And is it making you stuck? Is it leading you towards staying in depression in an unhealthy way? So what are some tools we can use? And we're going to get to the affirmations. Well, prayer and meditation are two of the most important. Prayer is and again, if this works for you, I'm not trying to get everybody to believe in these things. It might literally go against your beliefs. Praying means you're praying to God. Meditation means you're listening to God or a higher power. So, and they're essential because they help to focus our thoughts on our oneness in all creation. So whether or not you believe in a higher power, it does help to connect us to our own inner being. Visualization can help with that, and spiritual readings, whether it's the Bible or some other books that are just uplifting. These are ways that you can help yourself. Demonstrating gratitude. Studies have proven that when we are grateful, we function at a higher vibratory level, which makes us feel better. So having a gratitude journal, even in the midst of pain, have a gratitude journal where you say, today I'm thankful for, right? Like what it says, and it doesn't have to be a formal journal like this shows. Every day, write 3 things down that you are grateful for. And then review them at night. Love also. Who do you love? Where is there love in your life? You know, I can just focus on my dog and cat and feel love. And another one is forgiveness. It might be yourself you have to forgive, or perhaps the lost object or person. There is a technique, you might have heard of it, Ho'oponopono. It's very fascinating. This was done by a Hawaiian psychiatrist who worked with mentally ill people. He used this technique with them. He actually used it himself, not even directly on them. He thought of the prisoner, the mentally ill person, and this is what he said. And you can change the order. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And you can use this as a chant. Sometimes it's just connecting with yourself. You're just trying to connect with yourself. Sometimes you do this to connect with a higher power. This has been proven very effective in forgiveness, whether you need to forgive yourself or to forgive someone else. I know it seems like, how could that work? I'm just telling you it does. So just have faith that it does. Now, do you say it one time and it works? No, but you can. I find I often use this as I exercise walk. And I go, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I just, every step I take, I go through that. Like I said, you can change the order if it works better for you. But look it up, Ho'oponopono. It's very interesting. The whole story is interesting. So in addition to those techniques, you can do a spiritual inventory, which means, went too fast there, living from your values. So these are some values that I thought of. Pick 3 or 4 and ask yourself, am I living with these values? Am I still being me? Am I living with compassion, or have I gotten so jaded from what I've gone through? Am I living authentically? What are my values? Is being sociable a value of mine? Well, then maybe I need to stop isolating myself. So those are just things to live from your values, can help you feel stronger spiritually. So as Eric Butterworth said, things may happen around you and things may happen to you, but the only things that really count are the things that happen in you. So that's what I'm giving you, are tools that happen in you. Now, I would say that Kumar's quote is so true. You probably did not choose to suffer, but you do have the option to transform your suffering into a meaningful life. If anybody's heard of Viktor Frankl, and he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, he was a psychiatrist or psychologist in the concentration camps. And the Nazis took everything away from him, including his wedding ring, and killed all of his family members. But he decided to make his life meaningful by helping everybody who was in that concentration camp. That's what he did. You might think of the founders of MAD, for example. Christie, I think her name was, she lost her daughter in like late 1970s due to a drunk driver. And then she created MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which has been a phenomenal group. Or John Walsh. You can take your loss and make it into something meaningful. So it means changing your perspective. So how many people, what do people see over on the left? You may have seen this little thing before. What do you see? The black and white image. What do you see?
Oh,
See,
like
two babies.
like a vase or a vessel.
Okay, a vase or a vessel. And Jenny, you said what? Two.
I see two babies
Yeah.
looking at each other. Little kids, little kids.
Guess what? You're both right. They're both there. Well, it depends where you're looking. That's the whole point of this. You even if you can now see both, because I've told you they're both there, you're fluctuating quickly between the two of them. You can't see them both simultaneously at the same time.
Now I see it. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
yeah. So here's the white vase or vase. Here are the side views of two people looking at each other. So
Wow.
so that's really what it takes. What's your current perspective? What's a new perspective or a new story that you would like to tell yourself? My current perspective might be my life is over. A new perspective would be I can still make meaningful contributions to life. Well, would this make a difference in how you felt? So you just take a piece of paper, write down your current perspective, at least 3 of them, pick 3 new alternative perspectives and ask yourself, would this make a difference with how I'm coping right now? Okay. The other thing that gets in our way with how we do it, okay, is we often resist change. People are homeostasis. We like things to stay the same. But guess what? The fact that you're grieving lets you know that something has changed. So the more you can change your perspective to saying yes to change, the more it will help you to heal. Just know that a crisis can bring up the fears of the unknown. That's what change is, and that it's natural to feel out of control and helpless. But practicing the possibilities instead, no matter what is occurring. Because you can't stop the cycles of change, but you can learn to see change as a friend rather than a foe. The Chinese symbols for crisis is opportunity. The Chinese symbol for change is crisis and opportunity at the same time. Also, you want to be aware of whether you're using distraction and avoidance or getting into a balance between it. So distraction is when we bury our feelings with food or alcohol or drugs, or numbing out with TV or work. Perhaps we're avoiding by holding on to belongings for a long period of time. Or even avoiding is feeling like you need to be strong for others. So maybe you're thinking, I got to be strong for my kids, or I got to be strong for this or that. It's still avoiding your own experience. So a balance, and again, I will send this to those of you who want it because I'm going to go through this fast. And these are important, I think. You need to release the belongings, but you can do it gradually. And you can choose 1 or 2 that you want to save. You can stay with the pain or negative memory, but follow it purposely with a good one. So remember what I said about we can control our thoughts. So if you have a negative memory, like you remember how the person looked while they were dying or something, follow it purposely with, oh, I remember how much fun we had when we went to Disney World or whatever it is. Affirm beliefs that heal. And then be with the sadness when it comes. So you accept it. You don't have to invite it. Be strong for yourself, not for others, but for yourself. Keep your power instead of giving it away. When you do have those emotional moments, use it to communicate with your loved one. Oh, honey, thanks so much. And like I said before, find support groups with similar losses. Plan activities for meaningful days. I know, Jenny, you've done that. Like when it's an anniversary of something, you want to plan activities. And know it's okay to enjoy life again. I remember the first time I laughed after my son died. There was part of me going, how could I laugh? You know, life goes on. We can, you know, it's okay. Know that relationships will change. Let go of resentments and forgive as much as possible. Change the philosophy of life so that you can live a more meaningful life, and appreciate every single moment because you realize that life is a gift. I do have more, but I don't know if we have more time. Do people want to just stop here, or do you want me to go on? What's the consensus and how does that work for you, Kate? Kate,
I'm good.
you're on.
I was talking away and I was on mute.
Okay.
So I'm open to staying on if folks want to stay on for a little bit longer. I know we have one or two probably that do need to leave, but
Okay, so do you folks want me to do that? And those of you who have to leave, I understand, because what, Jenny, what's the way?
I have to leave, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, glad you were here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right, well, I'll go on until no one's here. So I think the other thing to remember is to reassess our priorities. COVID really taught us this. To place value on family and friends and place value on yourself. So how many people have ever seen a gravestone that says, here lies a six-figure business person? Anybody ever see that on a gravestone? I think this is more likely what we see, isn't it? So we have to reassess our priorities. Going back to this curve, I have some things to show you, but that it's really hard to do unless you are actually at the restoration of energy and morale. Okay. So once you can get to that, the loss is accepted and life resumes, there are some other techniques that you can use to move forward, which is transcendence, which means that something is of greater value, a higher power. Using your pain to help others like John Walsh did and the founders of MAD, and define your purpose. So for those of you who want to work on defining your purpose, you can journal. Here are some journal questions to ask yourself that you might, and journaling just means you write these prompts down and then you just write down whatever comes to mind. If you want some tools to help with that, on my truestcoaching.com, I have a Truest Life roadmap, and that can help you move forward once you have the energy to do so. So I know this might not be practical or possible to do right now, but once you release that energy spent on grieving, and then you're saying, okay, now what? Trudy's talking about reinventing my life. Well, now that I'm a widow, or now that I don't have a child, or now that I, now that I moved to a place where I don't know anybody, these tools can be of help. So you envision by thinking, feeling, energizing, and creating what you want your life to look like. So you imagine what it's going to look like. You get into that feeling state of how it actually feels. Remove any doubt and expect that it can happen. Things that will help you do that is reading personal growth books. By the way, this is my favorite grieving book. You Can Heal Your Heart by Louise Hay and David Kessler. The reason it's my favorite is because they take every single kind of loss. Loss of pet, loss of relationship by divorce or death, loss of self-esteem. They have every loss you could think of, they have addressed. And then they have affirmations for each kind. So what is a daily affirmation? If you haven't heard me say this before, again, this is the best way I find to change things, is you write down affirmations. That means on a Post-it note or an index card, you hand print, and there's a reason for that. You hand print and you use I, first personal pronoun I. You state what you want positively, not instead of like, I won't be upset that my loved one is gone. You say, I can handle the fact that my loved one has gone. You state it positively, what you want. You put it in the present tense. If that is too hard to do, then tell yourself, I am in the process of accepting that I can handle the loss of my loved one. You want to use the present tense instead of a future tense. It's kind of like, I will diet tomorrow. What happens? Every day, it's the next day I'm going to do this, as opposed to, I am releasing weight now. Do you get the difference in the energy there? So you want to say you want to state what you want instead of what you don't want. You want to state it in the present tense, and you want to be as specific as possible. Then you take those affirmations, you write it as briefly as possible, use no more than 3, feel as if it's already true. So you get into the 5 physical senses of it. What would I hear people saying? How would I feel? What would I feel in my body? How would it smell? What would I be looking at? How would my body look? And then you use gratitude again. You say, thank you, God or higher power or inner being, whatever works for you. And you place it by your bedside. And first thing in the morning, you read them with feeling as if it's already true, with gratitude, just like I've stated here. And right before you go to sleep, because studies have shown our brain can be rewired the best when we are at a relaxed level of mind, which is why meditation works so well. You can also use, you might have heard of this, creating a vision board. And I was just talking to Kate about workshops. We could do a workshop on this, but creating a vision board, something for you to look at. We don't have time. I do have some meditations I could send out to you. If we have time, I would actually lead you through a meditation right now. But there are meditations that can help you heal from grief. And if all these self-help things, you think you might need a professional therapist, coach, or mentor, a therapist really helps with A, B, C, D. A coach, once you have the energy, can help with E and F. There is a difference between counseling and coaching. Coaching is moving forward. Counseling is helping you with painful emotions to create functioning again. If you, I have a book about reinventing yourself, and here's how you can reach me. If anybody would like more information, or if you would like me to send you copies of the slide or the exercises in a easier to read format, I'll be happy to do so. Like I said, I know I went through a lot and I was hoping to get that meditation in, but it's, you can't do a meditation in a hurry. So anyhow, anybody have any questions that I can help or assist with, or you want to ask about? Okay. Well, I thank you all for your time. I hope, Fran, I know you mentioned you're a recent widow. I hope that this was of help to you?
Oh, it was, I guess my only thought right now is that because it's so relatively new, that some of the stuff you mentioned is going to take a little bit of time before that
Yeah,
I can start working on that. But I do appreciate all the help and been extremely kind with all this stuff.
well,
I
well,
appreciate
you're
it.
more than welcome. I would suggest you could, the affirmations might be of help even right now, or get that book, You Can Heal Your Heart by Kessler and Hay.
Sounds good. Yeah, I wrote that one down.
Yeah.
I hope to get it, get some inspiration from that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. I understand, as I've shared with you, I've also had a lot of other losses I didn't share with you, but I know how it feels, and I know it can work. I know when we do these things, it works, it helps. So
Good.
okay. Well, thank you for your time. It was nice meeting
You.
you. And those of you who I cannot see, thank you for also attending Pam and the 919 person on the phone. All right.
Bye.